welcome back to Medium with a Mic. I'm Kari, your resident psychic medium, empath, Beth doula, and today your cosmic tour guide. So, let me ask you something before we get started. Do you ever look at your astrological sign and think, yeah, that actually tracks? Or maybe you've rolled your eyes at it and thought, come on, how can the position of a planet when I was born determine who I am? I get both reactions, I really do. But here's what I want to explore with you today because I think the real answer sits somewhere that most people aren't talking about. And you know me, it's a place where ancient wisdom, modern neuroscience, and soul level intention all meet. Today's episode is called Born at the Right Time: Astrology, Archetypes, and the Soul's Blueprint. And by the end of this, I think you're going to look at your birth date and your whole original design very differently. I want to start with a premise that I hold deeply, both as a medium and as someone who's spent decades sitting with people at the edge of death and life. The moment of your birth was not an accident. Now, I'm not talking about the circumstances, the hospital room, the weather, whether your mom had an epidural. I'm talking about the soul level timing, the actual moment the soul fully inhabits the body and takes its first breath. That moment, I believe, is chosen. From a soul contract perspective, and if you've been hanging out with me for a while, you know I talk about sacred contracts a lot. The soul comes in with intention. It selects the vehicle or body, the family, the era, and yes, the moment of arrival. And that moment carries an energetic imprint. The planetary positions, the season, the collective energy humming on the planet at that exact second, all of it becomes part of your original frequency. Think of it less like the stars made you this way and more like you looked at the energetic weather forecast and you chose the conditions that matched what you came here to experience or to answer. Because I've always said we don't come here to learn a lesson. We come here to have an experience or answer a question. And the birth moment, that's your opening note. Okay, so let's talk about archetypes because this is the piece that ties astrology to something much bigger than your horoscope. The word archetype comes from the Greek arch, meaning original, and typos, meaning pattern. In An archetype is essentially a universal character template, the a pattern of energy and behavior that shows up across every culture, every mythology, every era of human history. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist, famously identified archetypes as part of the collective unconscious. The idea that certain patterns of personality, behavior, and energy are so fundamental to human experience that they live in all of us: the warrior, the healer, the sage, the shadow, the trickster, the nurturer. Sound familiar? Because those archetypes map almost perfectly onto the zodiac. Aries is the warrior, initiating, bold, first. Cancer is the nurturer, protective, deeply feeling, home centered. Scorpio is the shadow walker, intense, transformative, not afraid of the dark. Capricorn is the sage builder, disciplined, long game, legacy minded. Here's what's so fascinating: ancient cultures all over the world, the Babylonians, the Egyptians, the Greeks, the Mayans, independently developed systems for tracking the sky and connecting it to personality types. They didn't have phones, they didn't have the internet, and they all arrived at similar conclusions. Why? Because they were observing something real. They were watching people. They were noticing patterns across thousands of humans over hundreds of years. And they wrapped those patterns in story and symbol because that's how humans remember things. The zodiac archetypes aren't a cosmic fairy tale, they're ancient pattern recognition. And they've lasted because they contain a kernel of truth that humanity keeps rediscovering. Now, here's the cool part, because if you've ever felt embarrassed talking about astrology around a scientist type, I want to give you some ammunition. Season of birth affects human neurodevelopment in measurable ways. This is peer reviewed research. Studies have found that the season in which you were born influences dopamine and serotonin regulation in the developing brain. These are your primary mood and motivation neurotransmitters. Winter and spring babies show statistically different baseline patterns than summer and fall babies. That affects temperament, risk tolerance, emotional sensitivity, even creativity. Light exposure during fetal development, particularly in the third trimester, shapes how the nervous system calibrates its internal clock. Your circadian biology, which governs everything from sleep to hormonal cycles to how you respond to stress, is partly set before you were born. Researchers have also found correlations between season of birth and certain personality tendencies. But the data isn't destiny, it's a lean, a tendency, or a dial setting. The zodiac signs follow the seasons. Here's a few. Aries is March and April. Spring's beginning. New, initiating, bold energy. Cancer, June, July, or midsummer. Warm, inward, protective. Scorpio, October, November, late autumn. Things dying back, deep, intense, transformation, focused. Capricorn, December, January, deep winter. Disciplined, enduring, strategic. The ancient astrologers were mapping personality tendencies onto the seasonal rhythms of the earth, and modern neuroscience is quietly confirming that those seasonal rhythms do, in fact, shape us. They were right. They just didn't have the vocabulary that we have now. Here's where I want to make a turn that I think is going to land for you a lot. We talk a lot in spiritual communities about empaths, and one of the most common things I hear is being an empath is a curse. It's too much. I feel everything and I can't turn it off. And I get it. I really do. I've lived it. When you walk into a room and absorb every emotional current in it without even trying, that can be absolutely exhausting. But here's the thing, the empathic wiring itself isn't the problem, it's the relationship to the wiring. An empath who hasn't learned to work with their sensitivity yet feels like they're drowning in other people's pain. An empath who has built boundaries, who has learned to use the sensitivity with intention, is one of the most powerful healers, connectors, and guides on this planet. Same nervous system, completely different experience. And the exact same logic applies to your astrological design. A Scorpio who hasn't integrated their intensity can be destructive to themselves and others. A Scorpio who has, they're the person everyone turns to in a crisis, the one who can walk into the darkest places and not flinch. A Pisces who hasn't learned to ground their dreaminess can float through life unmoored. A Pisces who has, they're visionary, artists, intuitive healers, people who access dimensions of feeling most of us can barely perceive. The sign, the archetype, is the instrument. The soul decides how to play it. So let's bring this back to where we started. The soul chooses the moment. I believe, and this is rooted in what I've experienced as a medium, in the communications I've received from the other side, in the soul contracts I've studied, that before we come in, there is a process, a consultation, if you will. The incoming soul, with the guidance of its counsel on the other side, reviews the energetic conditions available, the family, the era, the moment, the chart. And the chart, the astrological blueprint, isn't handed to you like an assignment. It's selected because it matches the frequency, the tendencies, the strengths, and the growth edges that the soul is coming in to work with. This is why I love astrology not as a prediction system, but as a map. Not this is what will happen to you, but this is the terrain you choose to navigate. And here's the piece I really want you to sit with. You bring about what you think about. That's not just a law of attraction bumper sticker. It's a description of how consciousness interacts with reality. And if that's true, and I totally believe it is, then the soul that arrives with intention, with the archetype, with the energetic signature of that birth moment, is already in motion, already creating, already becoming. We are so much more in control of our lives than most people ever realize. The tragedy isn't that we have no power, it's that so many people never discover that they do. So here's what I want you to take with you today. Your birth moment wasn't random. The sign you were born under isn't a parlor trick. The archetype you carry, whether you resonate with it immediately or it takes you decades to recognize, is a real pattern observed across millennia, partly confirmed by science, and chosen at the soul level for reasons that are entirely yours. You are not a mistake of timing. You are not too much or too little of anything. You arrived exactly when and how you were supposed to. And what you do with that original design, that is the adventure. If you've been sleeping on your astrological chart, maybe this is the nudge to pick it back up. Not to look for predictions, but to look for a map. Until next time, trust the timing, trust the design, and trust yourself. If this episode stirred anything in you, please like, subscribe, comment, tell a friend. Word of mouth is the most powerful thing in podcasting, and it genuinely means the world to me. This show is completely ad-free and listener supported. If you've gotten value from what I do here, you can buy me a coffee at sacredwhispers1111.com on the podcast page. Every single cup keeps this going. I'm Kari. This is Medium with the Mic, and I'll see you soon. Keep listening to those whispers of wisdom.